I will never forget that cold, rainy night. The rain dripped down from the eaves, beating against the stone slabs, making a deathly silent sound. My husband, the man who once cherished and protected me in every way, was now standing before me, holding our newborn in his arms. The child had only been born 7 days ago, hadn't even had the chance to properly see this world yet, was being sent away to a distant place by his own hands. Ayao is carrying my flesh and blood. I absolutely cannot let the child be reduced to a bastard status. His voice was like an ice-tempered blade, cutting into my heart stroke by stroke. I looked at him. In the rainy night, the candlelight stretched his profile long and narrow, reflecting not a trace of the affection from before. In his eyes was only his so-called Yao, that woman who lingered outside my delivery room, occasionally letting out a phony cough, yet never truly cared whether I lived or died. My son, my own flesh and blood, merely because she got pregnant, became an obstacle in her eyes that must be eliminated. The severe pain in my heart nearly made me unable to stand steady. I used all my strength to stabilize my trembling body. Tears had long blurred my vision, but I bit my lip hard to keep them from falling. Crying in front of this man would only make me appear even more pathetic and laughable, illegitimate. I let out a cold laugh. My voice trembled with anger, but I still tried to stay calm. I Chin Yiru, am the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor, married to you, Shen, as your legal wife. My son is the only legitimate eldest son of this marquis household. How can he be called illegitimate? That a Yao you speak of is nothing more than a concubine you brought into the household. The child she bears is the one who should be illegitimate. The look in his eyes as he gazed at me was full of impatience and a trace of disgust. Yiru, you clearly know that a Yao and I are childhood sweethearts with deep affection. If it weren't for the arranged marriage between our two families back then, how could I have married you? You've occupied the position of the Shen family's matriarch for so many years. Now that a Yao has finally conceived my bloodline, why must you press her so relentlessly? Every single word he spoke was like a poisoned needle, stabbing me until I was completely torn apart. What does he mean by occupied? Since marrying into the marquis household, I've diligently managed the domestic affairs and been filial to my parents-in-law, never once making a single mistake in the 5 years since I married him. Even if I have no merit, I've at least endured hardship. Now I've borne him a legitimate son, yet he turns around and sends the child away, all to pave the way for a concubine's child. I seemed to hear the sound of my own heart shattering. All the love and trust I once had for him came crashing down in an instant. I suddenly felt a wave of nausea. What I once thought was deep affection was nothing but a hypocritical lie. He never loved me. What he loved was the power and influence of the Qin family behind me. Now his wings have grown strong. He kicked me aside without a second thought. I took a deep breath, struggling to calm the raging storm inside me. My hand slipped out from my sleeve, clutching tightly a divorce letter I had prepared. Long ago, a document he had casually promised me before I gave birth to placate me, never thinking I would actually bring it out. I flung that thin piece of paper at his face like casting off a filthy rag stained with dirt. Shen Huaiyan, do you really think I, Qin Yiru, can't survive without you? I held back my tears, yet my voice became unprecedentedly firm. I, Qin Yiru, am severing all ties with you, Shen Huaiyan. Today, since you can't tolerate my flesh and blood, I, Qin Yiru, also can't tolerate a heartless and ungrateful person like you. The divorce letter is here. From now on, you and I part ways, each to find our own happiness. The divorce letter floated down lightly, landing on the ground and getting soaked with rainwater, the characters becoming somewhat blurred. Shen Huaiyan was stunned at first, then flew into a rage. Qin Yiru, how dare you? Before he could finish speaking, I had already turned around, no longer sparing him a glance. Behind me came his furious roars and the shocked cries of the guards, but I turned a deaf ear. I don't know where my child has been taken, but I swear I will find him, and those who have hurt me and my child, I won't let a single one of them off. I staggered back to my own courtyard and collapsed onto the cold ground. The hairpins on my head scattered everywhere, my hair in disarray. My maid Qingmei rushed in panic-stricken, and seeing me in this state, her face turned pale with fright. "Miss, what happened to you?" Qingmei supported me, tears streaming down her face. I gripped her hand tightly, my eyes resolute. "Qingmei, go pack our things, we're leaving this place." Qingmei froze. "Leave, miss. You and the Marquis. No need to say more, I've already divorced him." My voice was terrifyingly calm, but only I knew that a raging fire was burning deep within my heart. Qingmei was shocked, but seeing the determination in my eyes, she knew I wasn't joking. She quickly sprang into action, packing a few simple clothes and some silver. I knew I couldn't just leave like this. I still had my son, and I still needed revenge. However, I knew well that with my current status as a discarded woman abandoned by the Marquise's household, trying to contend with the powerful Shen Huaiyan would be like throwing an egg against a rock. I had to have a new identity, new power. Me thoughts drifted back to many years ago. Before grandmother passed away, she had secretly given me an antique jade pendant and told me that if one day I found myself in a desperate situation with nowhere to turn, I could take this jade pendant to Embroidery Workshop Street in Jiangnan to find an embroiderer surnamed Liu. Grandmother said she would show me a way forward. At that time, I was immersed in my sweet romance with Shen Huaiyan and didn't take those words to heart. Looking back now, grandmother had already foreseen my future. On the night I left the Marquis Manor, the rain fell even harder. I sat in a shabby carriage, wearing only a thin cloak. Looking back, the lights of the Marquis Manor appeared blurry and distant through the curtain of rain, as if they would have nothing to do with me for the rest of my life. The carriage headed south all the way, straight to Jiangnan. The journey was long and my body was weak, but deep inside, that unwillingness and flame of revenge supported me. Shen Huaiyan's cold words and the swaddling clothes of the child in his arms kept echoing in my mind. "My child, I will definitely find you and bring you back." By the time I arrived at Embroidery Workshop Street in Jiangnan, half a month had already passed. I found the embroidery workshop that grandmother had mentioned. The storefront wasn't large, but it exuded a low-key luxury. A woman around 40 years old lifted her head from behind the embroidery frame. Her gaze was sharp yet calm, as if she could see through people's hearts. "You are a child of the Qin family, aren't you?" Liu Xuniang's voice carried a hint of hoarseness, yet was exceptionally gentle. My heart trembled, and I hurriedly presented the jade pendant. Liu Xuniang took the jade pendant and carefully caressed it. A trace of complex emotion flashed in her eyes. It really was her. Liu Xuniang sighed, waved her hand to signal Qingmei to leave, then brought me into the inner chamber. "Your grandmother once instructed me that if you were in dire straits, you could come find me. She also said that the blood flowing in your bones is the purest bloodline of the Qin family, absolutely incomparable to ordinary women." Liu Xuniang's gaze once again fell on my face, as if examining something. "Do you know that your birth mother was not the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor's manor?" I raised my head in shock. These words exploded like thunder in my ears. I had known since childhood that I was the legitimate daughter of Grand Tutor Qin's family. How could this be? Liu Xuniang saw my expression and knew I was unaware, so she slowly explained, "Your birth mother was actually the current emperor's own younger sister, Princess Zhouyi. Back then, Princess Zhouyi fell in love with your birth father, Qin Mu, the younger brother of Grand Tutor Qin Yan. However, the emperor arranged a marriage alliance with Shu and forcibly betrothed Princess Zhouyi to the previous emperor, who was still crown prince at the time. The princess was unwilling and eloped with Qin Mu later. Because Qin Mu died from severe injuries, the princess entrusted you to Qin Yan, only asking that you could grow up safely, far from the disputes of the imperial court. To conceal the truth from others, Qin Yan publicly claimed you were his legitimate daughter, and that jade pendant was Princess Zhouyi's personal belonging, also serving as proof of your identity." Liu Xuniang's words completely overturned my understanding of over 20 years. "I am not the Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter, I am the princess's daughter. My status is actually so noble. Since you are Princess Zhouyi's daughter, royal blood flows in your bones. If you want revenge, if you want to take back your child with the identity of the princess's daughter, you'll have the capital to contend with Shen Huaiyan." Liu Xuniang's eyes were full of encouragement. "What is more, Princess Zhouyi left behind a generous dowry and private property when she was alive. I've been managing it for her all these years. and now it is time to return everything to its rightful owner. I feel like my entire world has been completely overturned and then reassembled anew, so I wasn't alone and helpless after all. So I actually have such a powerful background. The hatred in my heart instantly transformed into tremendous motivation. Auntie Liu, what should I do? I looked at Liu Xunyang, my eyes full of longing and determination. Liu Xunyang smiled faintly, her eyes filled with perceptive wisdom. First, you need to reshape yourself. Qin Yiru is dead. The you of now is a phoenix rising from the ashes. Reborn through fire, your temperament, knowledge, and abilities all need to be elevated. Second, you need to take control of all the wealth and connections your mother left behind. These will all become your blades of vengeance. Finally, and most importantly, you need someone who can lend you a helping hand under Liu Xunyang's arrangements. I started a brand new life. She settled me in a secluded villa and brought in all sorts of renowned masters to teach me Qin, chess, calligraphy, painting, poetry, songs, and even the ways of doing business and martial arts for self-defense. I was like a thirsty sponge, desperately soaking up knowledge and skills. I was no longer that naive woman who only knew how to be a dutiful wife and mother. I learned how to read account books, how to read people, how to strategize and scheme. At the same time, Liu Xunyang also revealed to me the massive fortune my mother had left behind, countless merchant houses, shops and land scattered across the land, and even secret money houses. The sheer scale of this wealth far exceeded anything I could have imagined, enough to rival a nation's treasury. Mother also left behind a private army. Although small in number, they were all elite fighters, utterly loyal. I began to slowly take over these enterprises, starting from the simplest accounts, gradually deepening my understanding. Those numbers I once thought tedious and dull now became chips for my revenge in my eyes. I was no longer doing this just for myself, but for my child, for the glory of Princess Zhouyi. I would make those who looked down on me and hurt me pay a painful price. 1 year later, I had been completely transformed. The former frailty and haggardness were swept away, replaced by composure, wisdom, and a powerful presence. I was no longer Qin Yiru, but had taken the alias Liu Yi, daughter of a wealthy merchant from Jiangnan, an extraordinary woman with devastating beauty and iron-fisted methods. Liu Xunyang told me things on Shen Huaiyan's side were not going well. The child he had with a Yao turned out to be a girl, which greatly disappointed him. What made matters worse for him was that after I left, the Qin family began using various pretexts to gradually weaken the Shen family's power. Grand Tutor Qin Yan announced publicly that the separation between Qin Yiru and Shen Huaiyan was due to Shen Huaiyan's infidelity in their marriage, which brought great humiliation to the Qin family. The Qin family pressed hard step by step in the imperial court, making it difficult for the Shen family to advance in officialdom. After losing the Qin family's support, Shen Huaiyan's marquee manor gradually showed signs of decline. As for a Yao, the woman for whom he had once been willing to abandon his wife, even after giving birth to a daughter, she failed to secure her position. Shen Huaiyan gradually lost interest in her as well. The time had come. I decided it was time to let the flames of my revenge burn fiercely. My first step was to rebuild my social circle. Under the identity of Liu Yi, I began to emerge at various poetry gatherings and banquets in Jiangnan. My elegant demeanor, exceptional talent, and extraordinary conversation quickly attracted many eyes. I deliberately befriended those young masters from prominent families and wealthy merchants in the Jiangnan region, expanding my network by chance. I met the current 8th Prince Xiaojing on a pleasure boat. He was handsome and graceful with an extraordinary bearing. Unlike others, his eyes carried a hint of unruliness and cynicism, yet deeply concealed wisdom. We became connected through a poem. He appreciated my talent, and I also saw the unknown ambitions behind him. The best part is the detail of bonding through poetry. No cliché hero saving the beauty, no deliberate social climbing, just two talented people with things on their minds resonating over a poem on a pleasure boat. The female lead isn't fighting alone, and Xiaojing isn't just a tool character. They're each other's kindred spirits and future partners fighting side by side. This kind of meeting, neither dependent nor settling, makes the female lead's revenge journey not only satisfying but also adds a touch of romance and confidence. I didn't rush to reveal my identity, but instead interacted with him as Liu Yi. Xiaojing's interest in me grew day by day, and he began appearing frequently at events I attended. We discussed empirical evidence, sipped tea, and debated philosophy. He didn't know I was Qin Yiru, and I didn't tell him I needed his power. As time went on, my relationship with Xiaojing grew closer. Though he appeared frivolous on the surface, he actually had the world at heart and strategic brilliance in his chest. He confided in me his dissatisfaction with court corruption and his determination to change it all, and I also saw his potential to become a wise ruler. Miss Liu, what do you think should become of the world's situation one day? Xiaojing looked at me intensely in my separate residence. I gently waved the round fan in my hand and smiled. Your Highness is of imperial blood, bearing the dragon's aura. How could a mere woman presume to comment on matters of the world? However, if the world is to be stable and the people prosperous, besides wise rulers and renowned ministers, we also need strong military and a wealthy nation. Xiaojing's eyes flashed with a glimmer of light upon hearing this. He knew I was no ordinary woman. I began using the wealth and connections my mother left behind to secretly cultivate power for Xiaojing. I provided him financial support through money houses, gathered intelligence for him through trading companies, and even deployed the private soldiers my mother left behind to train an elite guard unit for him. Xiaojing's trust in me grew stronger and stronger, as did his dependence on me. He began showing me his true self, his ambition, his vulnerability, his aspirations. At the same time, I was also investigating my child. Liu Xunyang dispatched all available personnel, searching far and wide for the distant relatives to whom Shen Huaiyan had sent the child away that year. Finally, in a remote mountain village 1,000 miles from the capital, we found my son. He had been fostered with a farming household, and though not abused, was dressed in rags and sallow and emaciated. When I learned he had been given the name Gudan, my heart shattered. I quietly brought the child back to Jiangnan and settled him in another secluded estate where he was carefully looked after. Watching his tender sleeping face, my heart filled with endless tenderness and resilience. My revenge was for him. The curtain on my vengeance had officially risen. I first utilized the business networks I had in my hands to suppress the Shen family's industries in Jiangnan. The Shen family had quite a few shops and land properties in Jiangnan. Through price wars, monopolizing supply sources and other means, I caused them heavy losses. Shen Huaiyan quickly felt the pressure. He sent people to Jiangnan to investigate, but they found nothing. He could never have imagined that an unknown nobody named Liu Yi would have such great power. The Shen family also encountered difficulties in the capital. Grand Tutor Qin Yan pressed them step by step, joining forces with other officials at court to impeach Shen Huaiyan on the grounds that he lacked private virtue and lived an extravagant life. Shen Huaiyan had no choice but to exhaust himself dealing with it, with no time at all to attend to the losses in Jiangnan. At the same time, through Xiaojing, I intentionally or unintentionally spread some negative news about Shen Huaiyan. This information was a mix of truth and falsehood, but it was enough to make his reputation among the scholarly circles plummet. Shen Huaiyan, did you really think that I, Qin Yiru, couldn't survive without you? These words have now become my greatest confidence. The Shen family gradually declined, and Shen Huaiyan also became anxious and irritable. He was even more so toward Ayao, beating and scolding her at every turn. Ayao was not doing well, having lost her former glory and favor, spending her days in tears. This gave me a trace of satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. Far from enough, I decided to deliver him a fatal blow. I used the Shen family's business secrets that I had in my hands, along with Xiaojing's influence in the court, to design an intricate trap. First, I had my business purchase a batch of slow-moving silk from the Shen family at a high price. On the surface, it was to help the Shen family out of their urgent situation, but in reality, I secretly switched it out and replaced it with a batch of inferior goods. Then, through Xiaojing, I had the court issue an order prohibiting the export of inferior silk. This batch of inferior silk was directly stuck in the Shen family's hands, causing them heavy losses. Next, I took advantage of the Shen family's eagerness to turn the situation around and lured them into investing huge sums to develop a new maritime trade venture. I leaked false route information to them and hinted that this route would bring enormous profits. Compared to all that shouting about fighting and killing, this kind of bloodless victory through wits is way more devastating and way more satisfying. Watching Shen Huaiyan get blinded by greed and walk step by step into the trap, you really can't help but sigh. Never underestimate a woman who has been hurt to the core. Her counterattack is enough to destroy you beyond redemption. Shen Huaiyan was blinded by the immediate benefits before his eyes. He poured out his entire family fortune, even borrowing from loan sharks without hesitation to invest in this so-called new shipping route. The result was predictable. The Shen family's merchant ships encountered a storm at sea, and all cargo was lost. This so-called storm was naturally an ambush I had arranged in advance, creating a false disaster. Overnight, the Shen family declared bankruptcy, and Shen Huaiyan was completely ruined. He was crushed under massive debts, unable to breathe. The once arrogant and haughty marquis had now become like a stray dog. I decided to return to the capital to deliver the final blow. I returned to the capital under the identity of Lu Yi. Liu Xunyang announced to the public that I was her niece, and that I had come to the capital to inherit the family business, and would be opening a new trading house in the capital. My appearance caused a huge sensation in the capital. My beauty and wealth made me a hot topic of conversation throughout the city, and Xiaojing also timely displayed his affection for me to the world. When Shen Huaiyan learned of my presence in the capital, he was utterly shocked. He didn't know who this Lu Yi was, but he sensed a familiar aura about me. He sent people to investigate, but I came up empty-handed. I deliberately attended the capital's grandest banquet together with Xiaojing. I wore a flowing brocade gown of brilliant colors, with a golden walking hairpin adorning my head, my steps swaying gracefully. My appearance drew the attention of everyone present. Shen Huaiyan also attended this banquet. When he saw me, his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He watched me chatting and laughing with Xiaojing, watched the tenderness in Xiaojing's eyes toward me, and he was completely stunned. He didn't know I was Qin Yiru, but seeing my current magnificence and composure, I was like a completely different person from the Qin Yiru. He remembered the one he had abandoned. He saw that suppressed flame seemingly burning deep in my eyes. Halfway through the banquet, I deliberately walked up to Shen Huaiyan and smiled as I raised my glass to him. "Young Master Shen, I've long admired your name." I raised my wine glass, my voice clear and pleasant, yet carrying a hint of playfulness. Shen Huaiyan's face turned deathly pale. He looked at me, his lips trembling, but he couldn't speak. He instinctively glanced toward Xiaojing, his eyes filled with wariness and jealousy. "Is young Master Shen feeling unwell?" Xiaojing stepped forward at just the right moment, drew me into his embrace, his gaze carrying a trace of provocation. "Liu, don't bother with these tactless people. Let's go over there." Shen Huaiyan watched Xiaojing's territorial display and felt a shock in his heart. He didn't know Xiaojing's identity, but he could sense the innate nobility and oppressive aura emanating from him. After returning to the capital, I began to implement my revenge plan step by step. The Shen family had already gone bankrupt, but Shen Huaiyan was still a marquis. He still had his title. I wanted to make him lose everything. First, I arranged for people to spread the sordid affairs between Shen Huaiyan and a Yao, as well as the matter of how he had sent away his legitimate son to elevate his concubine to the principal wife's position, in the form of vivid storytelling throughout the streets and alleys of the capital. For a time, Shen Huaiyan became the capital's biggest laughingstock. The once infinitely glorious Marquis Shen was now cursed as a heartless man, a fickle lover, and some even began to question his character and family values. Those officials in the court who had once received favors from the Qin family also kicked him while he was down. They jointly submitted memorials impeaching Shen Huaiyan, claiming his moral character was lacking and he was unworthy of being a marquis. Shen Huaiyan's reputation was completely ruined, and he also received severe reprimands in court. He was stripped of all his actual positions, left with only the hollow shell of his marquis title. A Yao's days were even worse. She had originally thought she could rise in status through her child, but unexpectedly gave birth to a daughter. Now that the Shen family had fallen, and Shen Huaiyan had become crude and rude, Her life in the Marquise's residence was worse than that of a servant, and she spent her days washing her face with tears. On a sunny day, an imperial edict was issued from the palace. His Majesty announced to the world that Qin Yiru, daughter of Princess Zhao Yi, has now been found. She will be granted the title of Princess of Qinghe, bestowed with a fief of 1,000 households, and granted marriage to the 8th Prince Xiaojing. The edict spread throughout the capital like a thunderclap. Qin Yiru, she is back. And moreover, she is no longer the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor, but a noble princess, the future imperial consort. Everyone was shocked. Only then did they understand why the former Miss Qin had so resolutely divorced Shen Huaiyan, and why she had disappeared for a whole year. It turned out she wasn't abandoned, but rather underwent a phoenix's rebirth. When Shen Huaiyan heard this edict, he completely broke down. He once thought he had kicked Qin Yiru aside, never imagining he had kicked aside a princess's daughter. He once thought he had cleared obstacles for a Yao, never realizing he had ruined his own future and the Shen family's prospects. He rushed to the entrance of my residence, tearfully begging for my forgiveness. Yiru, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Please, for the sake of our time as husband and wife, spare me. Spare the Shen family. His tears and snot flowed freely, utterly wretched where was even half the bearing of a marquis from back then. I looked at his pathetic state, but my heart no longer stirred. I slowly walked up to him, looking down at him from above. Shen Huaiyan, do you still remember that rainy night a year ago? You held my child and said he wasn't worthy of being the legitimate son. Now, what right do you have to beg me for forgiveness? My child has been found. He will receive the best education, enjoy the most noble status, and you, Shen Huaiyan, you will have nothing. I looked at him coldly. You once said, I couldn't survive without you. Now, I am telling you, I am living better than you ever imagined. I, Qin Yiru, have never needed your pity or charity. Shen Huaiyan collapsed to the ground in despair. He finally understood he had completely lost me and completely destroyed himself. Xiaojing ascended the throne as emperor. I was conferred the title of Empress, and my son was made crown prince, legitimately becoming the heir apparent. He was no longer that abandoned child, but the future hope of great Liang. Shen Huaiyan was ultimately stripped of his title and reduced to a commoner. A Yao was cast out by the Shen family, struggling in poverty with her daughter. Everything they once possessed had turned to bubbles. On the day I ascended to the phoenix throne, dressed in phoenix robes and wearing the phoenix crown, I looked down upon the magnificent golden palace. My son stood beside me, his tender face bearing an innocent and cheerful smile. I gazed out the window. The sun was bright, the breeze gentle, and all the suffering and despair of the past had vanished with the wind. I had fulfilled my promise. I had found my child. I had my own ambitions, and I was no longer that Qin Yiru who blindly loved and let herself be manipulated. I am now the Princess of Qinghe, the Empress, and a mother, the most noble woman in all the land. Self-growth is lifelong confidence. Strength will never betray you. Qin Yiru was initially a sheltered woman who relied on her family and husband, with managing the household and supporting her husband while raising children being her entire life. After encountering misfortune, she started from scratch learning business practices, strategic planning and martial arts for self-defense, absorbing knowledge like a sponge, and ultimately became capable of strategic planning, using commercial means to crush the Shen family, and even assisting Xiaojing in ascending the throne. This also tells us that no matter what circumstances we find ourselves in, we must never give up on self-growth. Relationships may sour, connections may fade, but the skills learned, the maturity gained, and the strength accumulated will forever be our own talisman. Just like Qin Yiru without that year of transformation, even with her identity as the princess's daughter, she would not have been able to achieve revenge and realize her self-worth.